In this episode of IT SPARC Cast, Apple Silicon gets pwned, your company wants you back in the office because you suck, and I asked DeepSeek to do my taxes.
Ooh.
Welcome to IT SPARC Cast. I'm your host, John Barger.
And I'm your host, Lou Schmidt.
It's Friday, January 31st.
And we made it through January. It's actually warming up a little. Life is good.
It is. IT SPARC Cast is a digest of the IT news over the past week with insights, opinions, and a little sarcasm from two experts, each with over 20 years of experience in IT or working for IT vendors. And so now let's get right into the news bites.
What is going on out there? Well, if you've been following us for any amount of time, you've probably noticed that we really pay attention to remote work and RTO. So this one crossed our viewpoint this week, and I thought it was interesting. Let's take a look. This is from the Wall Street Journal, and it's about return to office. And basically, they're reinforcing what we've essentially been saying the entire time. Return to office mandates apply to everyone except a chosen few. And this is what they found. So the new hybrid work hierarchy means star employees are getting to work from home. If they can't replace you easily or they think they want to reward you, they're using it as a reward instead of as the basic version of how they should be doing things. And this is probably going to continue until the power sort of balances out when we're starting to grow again, or at least hit steady state. So employees with unique skills and talents are often being offered more flexibility than their peers, labor researchers and recruiters say. This is what Wall Street Journal has found. And the privilege gets extended to those with a proven record of exceeding performance quotas, or whose brains and personal brands make them a hot target for competitors to poach. This is, classic, right? Sometimes it's also about seniority. So in other cases, your work from home status depends on what team you're on. And that, I think personally, my comment here, that is going to be a direct reflection of how good your manager is right there. And this is something you've heard John and I harp on a lot, but here's the Wall Street Journal just confirming that with their research. John, you got?
Yeah, so we've done a whole deep dive series. We're now 8 episodes in on a deep dive series about return to office and remote work. And our level of promotion of that work from home, work remote, not only is doable, it's actually preferable by both the employee and the employer when managed properly. And we've got a whole series on this. I will put a link in the show notes. If you're on YouTube, that link will be right above Lou's head, and you'll be able to click over and watch that series there. I highly recommend you do that if you have any interest in remote work, if you want to be able to make an argument against return to office, or if you're in a situation where you're being asked to support remote work. There's a lot of great information in there, so please do that. But as you said, Lou, the thing that we keep repeating over and over again, that remote work fails because of bad management. Either micromanagers or absentee managers, people that don't understand that the way you support and manage remote workers is different than the way you support and manage on-site workers.
And
it is a
really
different skill set.
So check this out. Wall Street Journal, you're going to love this. Wall Street Journal direct quote from an individual business development director in Mountain View who wasn't happy when a former employee moved from hybrid to 5 days a week in the office last year, with the exception being those who exceeded their performance quotas. His quote, and I give it directly, is he and his colleagues who didn't exceed quota went into the company's office every day and were routinely treated like children and micromanaged.
And that is the case. Micromanagement in general is demoralizing, defocusing, and demotivating. You're not going to get people to do their best when they're being micromanaged. You're going to get exactly what you manage out of them, if that, at best. You're not going to get people who go above and beyond. You're not going to get people that that try to impress and exceed because they're being effectively just downtrodden. So that's happens on remote work a lot because now you're out of view and your manager is looking and saying, I don't know what you're doing all day. Tell me exactly what you did every hour of the day. And that's just not going to fly. You can't do that. So,
And I have
but
personally been in conversations at the senior management level where the decision to lay people off went primarily towards the remote workers because the individual that was making those decisions didn't have to face them directly.
yeah.
So
So the other thing I'll say is that next week we're going to release a new episode of the deep dive, and we're going to go and we're going to answer questions from people like you. So first of all, send email to feedback@itsparkcast.com. Hit us up on X at IT SPARC Cast, and any questions you want us to cover about remote work, we're going to be taking that. We've already got quite a few queued up. We're really excited about that, but we do want to hear from you on that, and that'll be on Wednesday next week.
So we're all talking about this. What's something else that everybody's talking about right now?
Well, so if you watched last week's episode, you'll know that Lou went through the privacy policy for TikTok, and there was some very interesting findings in there. This week, I decided to do the same for DeepSeek, and you have to assume that we're going to be talking about DeepSeek this week, given all the news that it's happened there. And we're going to get into some more like technical, what is DeepSeek, and what are they doing in the next section, but I looked at the DeepSeek privacy policy, and they almost did a cut and paste of TikTok's privacy policy and put it in and used it there. And as Lou said last week on TikTok, credit is due to them being open about what they're doing. But if you're going to DeepSeek's website and using it, there's some things that you need to be aware of. So I'm going to read some quotes on there when it comes to user input. When you use our services, we may collect your text or audio input, prompts, uploaded files, feedback, chat history, or any other content that you provide to our model and service. Okay, so that's to be expected. It's learning, and it needs to do that. But then, where we store your information, there's a section. We store information we collect in secure servers located in the People's Republic of China.
Kudos to them for being open.
Absolutely. And I have nothing but respect for the DeepSeek team and what they've accomplished, and we're going to talk about that in the next section. But any company that is based in mainland China is subject to the Chinese government and their whims, and that's just part of doing business in China. This isn't a secret. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But what that means is that at any point, the Chinese government can ask DeepSeek for every bit, every 1 and 0 that's stored on its servers, and then use it for whatever it wants. So then
that's just a fact of life if you're a Chinese company.
It 100% is. And DeepSeek themselves have no say in the matter. That's just, if they're Chinese nationals, they started a company, that's just part of the business. So again, no judgment on DeepSeek here. Big props to DeepSeek for being open and honest about it. And, but you need to be aware that, and we'll get into DeepSeek versus ChatGPT in the next section, but I wouldn't be moving over to DeepSeek instead of ChatGPT or whichever other LLM you're using. They're all collecting your data. Every single one of them is collecting your data. But where
the question is, what sort of recourse do you have if that data is personal or material to your business? You're in IT, this is your business, or to your personal thing. And we're going to talk about some of that right now. For going further into DeepSeek, some of the challenges around this is you could look at DeepSeek as foreign outsourcing. And what was the thing that happened when we had this happen big time in the 90s when help desks and programming? You had to train your replacement. Well, guess what? There is big evidence. OpenAI has evidence that its models help train China's DeepSeek. So we're not trying to take away from what DeepSeek actually accomplished. That's what we're going to talk about next. But why were they able to pull it off so easily? In some respects, because they were able to take pre-processed training data from ChatGPT and train their model using something that was already refined. That is absolutely going to decrease the amount of compute you need to train. So, according to The Verge, where I got this particular piece from, OpenAI and Microsoft are investigating whether the Chinese rival used OpenAI's API to integrate OpenAI's AI models into DeepSeek's own models. And this was according to Bloomberg. The outlet sources said Microsoft security researchers detected that a large amount of data were being exfiltrated through the OpenAI developer accounts late in 2024. So this one sort of straddles the line between security and now that said, there's going to be a lot of most of these data models that we're seeing in the AGI space, the generalized what we call artificial intelligence, are basically internet scrapes, right? Which is why when John and I talk about this, we get confused why Google isn't leading this whole thing, because they have the best internet scrape anybody has. What the heck, guys? What's up with you? But the situation is rich with irony. After all, it was OpenAI that made huge leaps in the GPT model by sucking down the entirety of the written web without consent. Truly, we live in the future. But can we go a little bit deeper into what is going on here? And this is John and I just talking, right?
Yeah, now there's a podcast that I follow, and if you are interested in AI, I highly recommend it. It's called The Attention Mechanism with Andrew Main, and it's hosted by Andrew Main and Justin Robert Young. Justin Robert Young is a well-known and established podcaster. Andrew Main is a former engineer that worked at OpenAI. He's well seated in the industry, and they go through the news of the week on AI. Really great information. And this week they obviously talked about DeepSeek, and they gave their views on it. And I'm going to parrot some of those and give you my thoughts on top of them. But if you want to go really deep, I definitely recommend checking out The Attention Mechanism with Andrew
Absolutely. Main. But there's some really interesting things here.
So there's a lot of news out there, a lot of people saying, the joke is that ChatGPT didn't expect that its job would be taken by AI, playing on the whole thing about everybody being worried that AI was going to take their job. But, and we saw NVIDIA stock drop dramatically after people started using and seeing what was going on with DeepSeek and that it didn't require the same hardware requirements. So there's a bunch of things to go over here. One is what Lou started to talk about is, was DeepSeek trained on ChatGPT? And while we don't know for sure, it's pretty clear that it probably was. Matter of fact, if you ask DeepSeek, what model are you? It comes back with GPT-4. So that's pretty compelling there. There are certain times when you ask it for, like for a joke or some other things, where it comes back and returns the exact same data that would have been provided by ChatGPT. Now,
but does that mean it's actually ChatGPT, or does that mean they used the predefined, pre-digested information and are coming up to similar answers, that the algorithm may be different?
So one of the things that Andrew Main pointed out is that if you look at ChatGPT 4o, lowercase o, it was not trained the same way as ChatGPT 4 or 3.5 or the previous models. Those older models were trained by scraping the internet, just like Lou said. ChatGPT 4o was actually trained based on the data set created for ChatGPT 4. So in that case, there is a data set that's in a container, however they containerize that instead of training on the internet, they trained 4o on that data set.
So could I think of that as a distillation then?
It's exactly what it is. It is a distillation of all the information, and that makes it more efficient. That's why ChatGPT 4o is faster. It has the same basic data that is available in 4o, but is able to respond so much faster and use less computation resources. The same is true of humans. If you are trying to learn something by reading the encyclopedia versus reading a specialized book on that topic, you're going to do better based on the specialized book than going through the entire encyclopedia. It's just the nature of how you learn. LLMs learn in a very similar way. So that's part one. And they believe that what DeepSeek did was they just got a license for OpenAI, and they started pinging it with API calls and used that to train itself. And that's fair. Now, that's not to say that DeepSeek is cheating and that they have no value. That's not what I'm saying at all. Matter of fact, there are some really, really clever optimizations that they've done and things that we can learn from and that the industry can learn from that has been done as part of what DeepSeek has released. And the fact that they've released it as open source means that it is available for others to learn. And those optimizations that people are looking at right now are really clever, and they are things that Llama and OpenAI and Anthropic and others can learn from and make their systems more efficient as well. So from that standpoint, I don't think you're going to see DeepSeek replace ChatGPT. That's not going to happen. You can't have, and matter of fact, I don't think the U.S. government would allow that to happen. If it got that level of popularity, you'd see the same scrutiny against DeepSeek that we've been seeing against TikTok. So that's just not an option. But I think that where you might see a replacement is that DeepSeek might become the default for the homebrew or for the corporate clusters that are created for AI, where you don't want to use a cloud-based AI instead of using Llama. Now, that being said, you still need to make sure that you use a sanitized version of DeepSeek. And we know that there are people working on that today. We'll report out more as those start to get released. But there are, since it is open source, there are groups that are going through looking for any potential backdoors or anything else that's questionable, malicious, whatever it might be, and weeding that stuff out so that there is a distilled model. And that is what I would use if I were going to build a cluster or my own AI system that I wanted to use for real work, is I would use one of those distilled models.
Now, what's really interesting from what I saw, and I've already started looking into this, is that DeepSeek does not require the local vector processing that you would require for, say, a ChatGPT or a Llama model. So I've got an M4 Pro Mac, or Max, or whatever the heck it is, 64 gig of RAM. This thing runs models pretty well, but it hits the graphics subsystem to get its vector processing. So I've got a server upstairs. It's got 24 real cores, 192 gig of RAM, and it can't run these models because it has no vector processing. So I've got to do something about that. I have various plans, evil plans for that. But I could run these models on that server. Yeah. And that's really, really interesting.
So obviously what that means is that NVIDIA is dead. It might as well just like sell all your NVIDIA stock and that company's going to fold within the next year, right?
No.
No.
So the thing about these models is they use a lot of vector math, which is linear algebra. A lot of linear algebra, a lot of calculus. Matrix transforms are the primary thing that are driving this. If you ever took linear algebra, which I had to because engineering, you'd realize some of these transforms, right? They are radically accelerated in the vector processing, which is why a graphics company became the powerhouse for AI, because that's what these chips do. If you're playing a game, that's all they're doing. They're doing a huge vector transforms. So even though I could run this model and possibly train it, I can train it a lot faster if I have vector processing handy. Yeah, NVIDIA is not going to go out of business.
No, and the thing again, I'm in some cases I'm just parroting what Andrew had said on this podcast. Before last week, we didn't know how many NVIDIA chips we were going to need in the future. We knew it was going to be a lot more. All right,
and that's why.
And it still is. And that's why NVIDIA stock was climbing, and they at one point were the most valuable company on the planet, is because we knew that we were going to need more and more NVIDIA chips. At the end of the day, we're still going to need more and more NVIDIA chips and other AI providers to cover the demand that's coming. The demand that's coming is a tidal wave. And there's going to be so much demand for it. And if it gets cheaper because of something like DeepSeek making it more efficient, then demand's going to continue to go up. It's going to get fed into everything. You're going to see it put in, your toasters are going to use AI to determine the exact right crispiness of the toast. And all these other things are going to start happening. And then you're going to see more and more demand for chips. That's not going away. The need for nuclear power is not going away. Lou and I have talked about nuclear power on multiple episodes, and that is going to be the way we cover the needs for all these chips running all these AI processes is through something like nuclear power. So all of that stuff's still happening.
Think about this. I want you to think about this if you're a certain age or you've ever looked into it. I lived through the introduction of the microprocessor. I grew up in Silicon Valley, right? Everybody around me was doing this stuff. We went from IBM showing the first, I think, kitchen computer. Did you ever see that?
Yeah.
It's a big console that would organize your recipes, right? Now think about where there's computers. There's computers in doorknobs. There are 100 computers in your car. Right now, sitting at this desk, I am surrounded by computers. Some of them are in the form of lights, a controller, a laptop, a phone, a laptop, microphone, more than one. There's digital signal processors in here. Dude, this stuff's going to be everywhere.
Yeah.
This is exactly what's going to happen. This kind of intelligence. I like your toaster simile, because toasting bread and getting it just right is pretty hard.
So with that, we'd like to announce the return of the CVE of the week.
We feel like you haven't been scared enough.
All right, Lou. So I am a happy Apple user. I've got an M2 MacBook Air. I've got an M4 Pro Mac Mini. Things are so good. I don't have to worry about security. And that is one of the best values of having. Oh, and I've got an iPhone running a A16 processor, and I've got an iPad running an M2 processor. I am stoked, and I am the bastion of security. Right?
You are not going to feel good after I'm done talking to you.
Oh no.
Okay, so I work in a more hybrid environment than my buddy here does. I've got a Linux box, I've got Android, I've got all sorts of stuff over here. But I am still sucking seat a little bit over this one, and let me explain. So this one is coming to us via Ars Technica. Apple chips can be hacked to leak secrets from the Gmail, from iCloud, and more. Let me explain what's happening here, because this is a really, really interesting one. And as far as I've been able to search, there is no CVE available yet. This one hasn't been rated as far as I can tell. Now, it may be that I didn't look far enough. So Apple designed chips powering Macs, iPhones, and iPads contain two newly discovered vulnerabilities that leak credit card information, locations, and other sensitive data from Chrome and Safari-based browsers as they visit such sites as the iCloud, Calendar, Google Maps, and Proton Mail. So this particular attack vulnerability is only on web-based stuff. What it does is it blows up the sandboxing between your tabs. So let's talk a little bit about what this impacts and how it does it. So it breaks out of the sandboxing of the browsers via a software hardware attack. All Mac laptops from 2022 to present, the ones we're coming to you via, are vulnerable. All desktops from 2023 present. iPad Pro, Air, or Mini models from September 2021 to present. All iPhones from September 2021 to present, from A13 all the way up to the 3rd gen. Okay, all vulnerable. What's happening? So what it can do is it steals data from other parts of a running program, even if it's supposed to be sandbox. Here's how it does it. So Apple Silicon takes a speculative execution in new directions. So let me explain. Everybody who's following in IT heard about Spectre and Meltdown. Spectre and Meltdown were similar attacks that were executed against the x86, that being the Intel and the AMD architectures, that was using the speculative memory caching of the processors to arbitrarily read information from other processes. So you could be running in a virtual machine, you could break out of that virtual machine and pull stuff, or you could pull stuff from other programs. This one seems to be a little bit tighter. But let's take it out. What it's doing, the first and most powerful attack in this is called flop. It exploits a form of speculative execution implemented in the chip's load value predictor. So what this predictor does is it predicts the content of the memory where they're not immediately available. So the reason modern processors are so fast is that they can execute guesses, right? So if you ask your processor to do a thing, just like AI is going to say, well, what's the next most reasonable answer to this? Your microprocessor at a firmware silicon layer says, what do I think the next operation is going to be? And that's exactly how Spectre and Meltdown work. Apple, and kudos to their engineers, this is really clever stuff. It just introduced a new challenge, right? It's going to go look out for what it thinks the next process is going to be. And that is what that vector, the load value predictor, what am I going to have to load next? What do I think is going to be the next ask? Versus the fact that in Meltdown, it would just do the same calculation on what it thinks the next memory value would be at the same time. So that's flop. So flop, if I feed flop bad process information, which I can do through a web page, I can do through JavaScript, that the proof of concept in this attack was executed via JavaScript in a browser tab. It can actually use that distortion of load data to guess what other data is passing through in that application. Now, it appears to me that we have much more reliable inter-application walls than intra-application walls. And we don't know if Firefox is affected because they didn't test it. They tested Safari and they tested Chrome. So it's a group of researchers. John, you've got something here.
Well, it's more questions and how do we mitigate, because Apple has not released a fix for this. There are no known exploits in the wild. And the details from the security analysts that have found this won't be released to the public until later this year. That's not to say everything's hunky-dory, because there may be a release in the wild of an exploit today. That could happen. So,
and the thing is that you have to know how the second attack works, because there's a second attack called SLAP. SLAP abuses the load address predictor. So not only does the flop one it abuses the predictor that says, okay, what command am I going to, opcode command am I going to be given next? What SLAP does is it abuses the address predictor and says, where am I going to be asked to go next? Right? And if you can get it, this is tremendously advantageous to speeding up a process. But if you abuse it, you can get it to jump to other areas of the process that you didn't want to expose. And that's exactly what this is doing. So whereas LVP predicts the values of the memory content, LAP predicts the memory locations where the instruction data can be accessed. So working as designed, insanely powerful. Abused, big issue. So getting back to your question, first of all, Apple is aware of these attacks.
Right.
And they are working on it. There was no given mitigation, so you're going to have to go to Geek Ludog here. Geek Ludog says, if you're worried about this and you're going to a lot of websites that are questionable or you haven't been to before, that you don't trust, don't have mail and financial tabs open. Don't have your iCloud tab open in your browser, or have them running. Now, one thing I do not know that would be interesting to find out is if I have those running in a completely separate window, are they still vulnerable? I suspect they are.
Or a different browser. So maybe you use Safari for some things, Chrome for something else, and Firefox for something else.
I do that already.
Yeah.
I personally, I think if you have all that is a good idea, John. If you say, okay, all of my financial and sensitive, I'm going to put in Safari, and all of my random web browsing and social media and stuff like that, I'm going to put in Chrome. Then from what I understand, this attack won't work.
Right. Now, again, you should make sure that you do your research on this.
Not a security
we are doing.
researcher, just dangerous enough.
Right. So, but that is my understanding as well. And that's what I intend to do going forward. I do already have 3 browsers installed. I have Safari. I use Safari for casual browsing. I use Chrome for things that require Chrome. The podcast tool that we use here requires Chrome.
We use
so
it a
that's what
lot.
I use there. And then I have Firefox available that if I ever just need to go somewhere else, then I can do that. So that's what I do, and that's what I would recommend everybody does. It's probably not a bad practice anyway.
It's going to be very interesting to see how they mitigate this one. Whether or not they're going to have to tune up Xcode to actually put better memory protection between processes. I suspect that this is a compiler level fix. That said, I don't think this is a firmware level fix. I think they just need to mark out of bounds. They need to put permissions on the LVP and the LAP functions, which they don't have. Whether or not that's feasible, I don't write compilers. Go talk to, Linus Torvalds or somebody smart like that.
Yeah.
But that's one way you could do it.
Sure. So anyway, that's what we have on that. As we learn more, we'll report that out to you. But that is going to cover this week's episode. We couldn't do this podcast without listeners like you. We want to hear what you have to say. You can send us email at feedback@itsparkcast.com. That's feedback@itsparkcast.com. Or you can hit us up on X at IT SPARC Cast. We've had several people do that, and we've been very happy with the feedback that we've been getting. We want to hear from you. And again, remember that next week we're going to be going through listener questions for our deep dive topics on remote work. Please make sure that you send us any questions you have, you want us to address there. Be sure to hit like and subscribe, turn on notifications. That's going to help us grow. If you're feeling that you're getting valuable information out of what we're producing here, tell your friends, tell your colleagues about it so that they can get that same information as well. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.